The woman who owned half the territory arrived at dawn. She didn't knock. Of course she didn't. People who own things don't knock on their own property. Kalen Ridge stood in the doorway of what used to be his house, his knuckles white on the frame. He watched her dismount from a black horse that probably cost more than everything he had left in the world. Vesper Crane. Even her name sounded like something sharp. She was 6 feet of controlled fury, wrapped in expensive leather and a hat that cast a long, dark shadow. A shadow that covered eyes that had seen men, much stronger than Kalen, break. She'd taken his land. She'd taken his cattle. She'd taken his future. And now, he figured, she'd come for the only thing he still pretended to own, his pride. But Kalen was wrong. He didn't know that Vesper Crane hadn't come for his pride at all. She'd come for something else entirely, something that would shatter everything he thought he knew about survival, about his past, and about the woman standing right in front of him. And when she finally spoke, the air between them didn't just get cold. It got deadly. 3 months. That's how long Kalen had been a stranger in his own home. 3 months of waking up in his father's bed, knowing the deed had another name on it. 3 months of working fields that were no longer his. The drought had done it. 11 rainless months that had turned the sky to brass and the pastures to cracked yellow dust. He'd watched his cattle die on their feet. He'd watched the wells run dry, one by one, until his entire legacy had just blown away. And when the bank came calling, Vesper Crane had been right there, waiting. She'd shown up at the auction with a leather satchel full of cash and an expression that offered no comfort. She'd bought it all, the house, the land, the debt. He could stay, she'd said. He could work the land, pay her rent, keep breathing. The alternative was the road, with nothing but the clothes on his back and the dust in his throat. He'd chosen breathing, and he'd hated himself for it every single morning since. Now she stood 15 feet away. The reins of her expensive horse were loose in her gloved hand. Her eyes were fixed on him, not like he was a man, but like he was livestock she was considering buying or selling. The sun hadn't fully cleared the hills, and the air still had that high desert cold that makes your bones ache. Kalen could see his breath, coming fast and angry. He could see hers, too, steady, controlled. "You're 3 weeks late," Vesper said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It carried across the dirt yard like a blade drawn slow from a sheath. No anger, no emotion at all. That's what made it so much worse. She didn't need to yell. She owned him, and they both knew it. Kalen's jaw tightened so hard he felt his teeth grind. "I'm aware. Are you?" It wasn't a question. It was a judgment. She took 3 steps forward. He forced himself not to step back, forced himself to hold that gaze, those cold eyes that seemed to be calculating exactly how much he was worth, broken down into parts. 3 weeks, Ridge. That's 21 days you've lived in my house, on my land, without paying what you owe. I've been working the land. My land, she finished for him, the words sharp. Yes, I'm familiar with the arrangement. You work, I get paid, it's a simple transaction, except the payment part seems to have escaped your attention. Her presence was suffocating. It filled the space between them like heat from a forge. He'd forgotten how tall she was, how she seemed to take up more room than her body should allow, like the very air bent around her. The men in town talked about her. They called her the Iron Widow. Her husband Marcus had died 2 years back, a riding accident, they said, and ever since, Vesper Crane had turned harder than the drought-baked earth. They said she collected properties like other women collected recipes. What they didn't say, what Kalen couldn't help but notice right now, was how her presence made the air feel thinner, how looking at her too long made something angry and uncomfortable shift in his chest. "I'll have it by the end of the week," he said, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. "You won't." She said it with the certainty of someone reading yesterday's news. You didn't have it last week. You won't have it this week. So let's stop pretending this is about money you don't have and start discussing what happens next. And what's that? Vesper's lips curved, but it wasn't a smile. It was something sharper. You come work for me, directly. Kalen's anger, which was always simmering just below the surface, spiked. I work for myself. You work on my property, Ridge. There's a difference. She took another step, closing the distance. She was close now. Close enough that he could smell the leather of her gloves and something else. Something clean, like sage after a rain. I have 300 head of cattle that need moving. I have fences that won't mend themselves. I have men who think because I'm a woman, they can steal from me, and I won't notice. Her eyes locked onto his, and he felt the full force of her will. I need someone who knows this land, someone who has something to lose if they fail me. He felt his hands curl into fists at his sides. And if I say no? Then you're off my property by noon. She paused, and her next words hit him like a physical blow. And I burn your father's name off the gate on your way out. The air went out of him. The gate. The one piece of this place, the one thing that still carried the Ridge name, carved into the high arch by his grandfather's own hand. His father had maintained it. It was the first thing he saw when he came home, the last thing he saw when he left. And this woman held it hostage, just like she held everything else. But he saw something, just for a second. When she said it, something flickered in her eyes. A flash of something that looked almost like regret, like she knew exactly where to cut, and she hated that she had to do it. You'd do that, Kalen said, his voice flat. You'd burn it. I'd do worse to keep what's mine. She turned, all business again, and started walking back to her horse. Then she stopped, speaking without looking at him, her voice aimed at the rising sun. But I'd rather you said yes. Despite what you think of me, Ridge, I'm not in the business of destroying men for sport. Could have fooled me. She looked back over her shoulder, and for just a moment the mask slipped. The iron cracked. He saw something tired, something that looked almost lonely. You have until the sun clears those hills, she said, pointing. After that, the offer disappears. Vesper mounted her horse with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent more time in the saddle than on solid ground. She didn't wait for an answer. She didn't look back. She just rode toward the main house on the eastern ridge, the sprawling mansion she lived in, the one that had belonged to the previous landowner before she'd acquired that too. Kalen stood in the doorway, his heart hammering against his ribs. His mind raced through the options, but they all ended the same way. Pride or survival, dignity or destruction. And underneath it all, that nagging, uncomfortable feeling. Something about the way she'd looked at him, something that suggested Vesper Crane was just as trapped in all of this as he was. The sun began its slow, merciless climb over the hills. He had maybe 30 minutes to decide if he was going to swallow his pride and work for the woman who'd taken everything, or walk away with nothing but that pride and nowhere to go. He turned to go inside, to splash water on his face, to think. And that's when he saw it. He stopped cold. There, in the soft dirt near where Vesper's horse had stood, was a boot print. Her boot print, with the distinctive heel. But right next to it, half hidden by a bush, was another set of prints, smaller, deeper on the right side, like someone favoring an injured leg. Someone had been standing there, watching them, listening to every single word. Someone who'd been there before Vesper arrived, and had left in a hurry when she arrived. And suddenly, Kalen Ridge realized that working for Vesper Crane might be the least dangerous thing about this morning. Kalen knelt in the dirt, his anger forgotten, replaced by a cold, prickling caution. He studied the boot prints with the careful attention his father had taught him. 2 sets. Vespers, clear as day, and the other one, smaller, worn down heel, and that distinctive drag on the right side, deeper in the dust. Whoever it was, they'd stood there for a while based on how the impressions overlapped. They'd waited. They'd listened. And then they'd vanished into the tree line when Vesper rode up. The sun was climbing. His 30 minutes were almost gone. He didn't bother saddling his horse. He ran. He ran the half-mile to the main house, his boots kicking up dust, his mind racing. He found Vesper on the wide porch, standing with her back to him, overlooking the valley. She didn't turn when his boots hit the wooden steps, but her shoulders tensed. She knew he was there. "I'll work for you," Kalen said, his voice rough from the run. He waited. "But I have conditions." Now she turned. That slight curve of her lips was back. The one that wasn't a smile. "You think you're in a position to make demands, Ridge?" "You came to me personally," Kalen said, walking right up to her. He stopped just outside her space. "You could have sent any of your men to throw me out. You didn't. You came yourself." He held her gaze. "That tells me you need me, specifically. So yes, conditions." Something flickered in her eyes. Respect? Calculation? With Vesper, it was impossible to tell. "I'm listening." "I keep the gate," he said, his voice low and fierce. "The one with my family name. It's not yours to burn. When I'm done working for you, I get it back." He expected a fight. He expected her to argue, to put him in his place. Instead, she just nodded. "Done. What else?" The easy agreement threw him. "I want to know what I'm really getting into. You said men are stealing from you. I want the truth. What's happening on this land?" Vesper was quiet for a long moment. She turned, walking to the edge of the porch, her gloved hands gripping the railing. 3 of my cattle hands have quit in the past month," she said, her voice flat. 2 of them left in the middle of the night, didn't even collect their pay. She paused. "The 3rd one. His horse came back without him. We found him 2 days later, walking the north road, his boots worn through. He was delirious." "What did he say happened?" "He wouldn't say. He just kept his eyes on the door, took his money, left town the same day. He was terrified." "Could be anything," Kalen said, though his gut told him otherwise. "Men quit. Men get spooked." "Not like this," she said, looking at him over her shoulder. "Not good men who need the work. Not all at once." She turned back to the valley. "Something is scaring them off my land, Ridge. And whatever it is, it's costing me more than just missing cattle. It's costing me respect. People in town, they're whispering. They think I can't control my own property." Kalen moved closer, stopping a few feet behind her. He could see the tension in her spine, the way her knuckles had gone white on the railing. "You think someone's trying to push you out?" "I know they are," she said, the words sharp. "I just don't know who. Not yet." She turned to face him, her expression all business. "That's where you come in. You know every inch of this land. You know the people. You grew up here. You find out what's happening. And what's in it for me, besides my gate?" 20 acres, she said, without blinking. "Free and clear, your choice of where on the property." It was a good offer. Too good. His instincts screamed trap, but something in her expression stopped him. She looked tired. Not physically tired, but a deep, bone-deep weariness. Like she'd been fighting a war all by herself for so long, she'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone on her side. "Who else knows about this offer?" he asked. "No one, and it stays that way. As far as anyone knows, you're just another hand, working off your debt." "Why me?" Kalen pressed. "Why not hire someone from outside? Someone who doesn't have history with this place?" Vesper took a step closer. The distance between them was suddenly intimate, charged. He could see the tiny flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Because everyone else who works for me is afraid of something," she said, her voice low. And you, Ridge, you're too angry to be afraid. That's what I need right now. Someone too stubborn to run. Her honesty caught him off guard. It was the first time she'd spoken to him like he was a person, not an obstacle, not an asset, maybe even an equal. There's something else, Kalen said. This morning, when you came to the house, someone was watching us. Vesper's expression went from tired to ice cold in a heartbeat. What? From the trees, they left tracks, small boots, a limp. Her face was pale. Show me. They rode back to his house in a heavy silence. Vesper on her tall mare, Kalen on the aging gelding that had survived the drought by sheer stubbornness. The boot prints were still there, already starting to blur in the morning breeze. Vesper dismounted, kneeling in the dirt. She studied them with the same careful, calculating attention Kalen had used. Small feet, she murmured. Could be a woman, or a young man, and, a limp. She straightened, her eyes scanning the tree line, her hand resting on the pistol at her hip. Whoever it was, they knew we'd be there. They were waiting. How would they know you were coming to see me? I didn't tell anyone, Vesper said, her jaw tightening. Which means one of two things. Either they're watching the main house, or they're watching you. A chill ran down Kalen's spine that had nothing to do with the morning air. Why would anyone watch me? I'm nobody now. I have nothing. Maybe that's exactly why. Vesper mounted her horse, looking down at him, and for the first time he saw something in her eyes that looked almost like concern. Or maybe, she said, her voice grim, whoever's trying to push me out thinks you're my weakness now. A weakness? You're the man I just dispossessed, the man everyone in town pities. If you suddenly start working for me, it makes them nervous. It means I'm shoring up my defenses. It means I have someone on my side who knows the land. She gathered her reins. Either way, Ridge, you just became a target. She rode off before he could respond, leaving him standing in the dust, staring at the ghost prints of a watcher he'd never seen. He was left with the uncomfortable realization that in trying to save his home, he might have just signed his own death warrant. He turned to go inside, his mind reeling, and that's when he saw it. His blood didn't just run cold, it froze solid, there, on his doorframe, freshly carved into the wood, carved in the last hour, while he'd been at Vesper's. 3 words, cut deep and angry. She owns you. Kalen didn't sleep that night. He sat in the dark, in his father's chair, with his father's rifle across his lap. He watched the windows, waiting for a shadow to move, for the sound of a boot on the porch. But nothing came. The carved words haunted him more than any physical threat. It wasn't just a warning, it was a message. We can get to you. We can get inside. You are not safe. They wanted him afraid. They wanted him to run. By dawn, his fear had burned away, leaving something harder in its place. Anger. Fear was a luxury he couldn't afford. Running was an option he'd never had. He found Vesper in the northern pasture at sunrise. She was already working, mending a section of fence that hadn't been broken by cattle. It had been cut, clean through. Her gloved hands moved with practiced, efficient, angry motions. She didn't look up when he rode up, but she spoke. Her voice was tight. Couldn't sleep either. Someone carved a message into my doorframe, Kalen said, dismounting. He grabbed a section of wire to help. 3 words, she said. She owns you. Vesper's hands stilled. She looked at him then, her eyes searching his face. That was yesterday morning, after I left. And you're still here, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of surprise. Most men would have been gone by dawn. I'm not most men. Kalen pulled the wire tight, his muscles burning. She secured it. Besides, whoever left that message, they made a mistake. How do you figure? They told me exactly what they're afraid of. He met her eyes across the fence post. They're afraid of us working together. If I was just some broken-down rancher, they wouldn't bother threatening me. They're scared because they know what I know. He gestures at the land. They're scared because I know this land. He let the wire go. What are you not telling me, Crane? Because this feels personal. This isn't just about property. Someone doesn't just want your land. They want you broken. Vesper was quiet for a long, long time. She turned and stared out at the cut fence line. When she finally spoke, her voice was so soft he had to lean in to hear it. "My husband," she said. "Marcus. He didn't die in an accident." The words hung in the cold morning air like smoke. "He was murdered." Kalen felt something cold settle in his chest. "The story. The sheriff ruled it. Fell from his horse." "That's what the sheriff ruled," she said, her voice bitter. "But Marcus was the best rider in 3 territories. He didn't just fall." She turned back to the fence, her movements sharper now, violent. "2 days before he died, he told me someone had approached him. A man. Offered to buy all our land, half of what it was worth." "What happened?" "Marcus refused, laughed in his face. The man threatened him, said, 'Accidents happen to stubborn men.'" "Did he tell the sheriff?" "He told me not to worry," she said, her voice cracking for just 1 second. "He said he'd handle it." She took a shaky breath. 3 days later. I was a widow. Kalen understood. He finally understood. The hardness, the iron control, the need to own everything. It wasn't greed. It was armor. Vesper Crane hadn't just lost her husband. She'd lost him to the same people who were now trying to take everything else. She wasn't building an empire. She was building a fortress. "And you think whoever killed him is still after the land?" "I know they are." Her voice was flat steel again. "Because the same man who approached Marcus, he showed up at my door 6 months ago." "What?" "Same man, same offer, same price, same threats." She looked at him, and for the first time, Kalen saw it. Not just weariness, not just anger, real, profound fear. "I said no," she whispered. "And that's when my cattle hands started disappearing." "Who was he? The man?" Said his name was Garrett, tall, a scar across his left hand. Spoke like he was used to getting whatever he wanted. Vesper's jaw tightened. "He'll be back. Men like that always come back. And when he does, I need to know I'm not alone." The vulnerability in her voice, that raw admission, it did something to Kalen's anger. It didn't just cool it. It shifted it. This wasn't the woman who'd taken his land. This was a woman fighting the same kind of invisible, suffocating enemy he'd been fighting his whole life. Someone who'd lost everything that mattered and simply refused to break. "You're not alone," he heard himself say. Vesper held his gaze. Something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition. They were 2 broken pieces of what used to be whole lives. Maybe, just maybe, they could fit together long enough to survive what was coming. "There's more," Vesper said, her voice regaining its strength. "The north pasture, where my cattle keep disappearing. I went out there yesterday after I left your place." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, dark object, a piece of torn, heavy fabric. "This was caught on the fence, near where the tracks led. It's from a uniform." Kalen took it. The material was thick, dyed a familiar, deep blue. His stomach dropped. "This is—" "I know." Vesper's voice was flat. "It's from the sheriff's office." The implication hit him like a punch to the gut. "Which means," she said, "whoever is doing this, they have the law on their side." "We're not just fighting thieves, Ridge," she said, her eyes dark. "We're fighting the whole system." Before Kalen could even process what that meant, the sound of hoofbeats made them both turn, fast, approaching from the southern ridge. 3 riders. Even from a distance, Kalen recognized the lead horse, the big gray, Sheriff Dalton, flanked by his 2 deputies. "Let me do the talking," Vesper said quietly, her hand dropping to the pistol at her hip. The sheriff pulled his horse up hard, the animal dancing sideways, kicking up dust. Dalton was a big man, with a face that had seen too much sun and not enough conscience. His eyes landed on Kalen, and a slow, ugly smile spread across his face. "Mrs. Crane," he said, his voice a folksy drawl that didn't match his eyes. "Heard you hired yourself a new hand." "I did," Vesper said, her voice ice. "Is that a crime, Sheriff?" "Depends." Dalton's smile didn't reach his eyes. He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. "See, I got a report this morning. Anonymous." "Oh?" "Someone claimed they saw Ridge here. Cutting your fence. This very fence." He gestured to the fresh men's. "Said he was letting your cattle loose, trying to make you look bad, trying to sabotage you." Kalen's hands curled into fists. "That's a lie." "Is it?" The sheriff leaned forward in his saddle, his eyes full of false concern. "Because it seems mighty, convenient. You lose your land to Mrs. Crane, and suddenly, her property starts falling apart. A man might think," Dalton continued, "you're looking for revenge." "Kalen was with me yesterday," Vesper said, her voice cutting through the tension. "All day. Your witness is mistaken." "Maybe." Dalton's gaze moved between them, speculative, insulting. "Or maybe you're covering for him. Maybe you two have a different kind of arrangement." "Get off my land, Dalton." "Now, Mrs. Crane, I'm just here to do my job, and right now, my job is to take Mr. Ridge here in for questioning." The 2 deputies' hands moved to their holsters. "You can come peaceful, Ridge," Dalton smiled, "or we can do this the hard way." Kalen looked at Vesper. He saw the calculation in her eyes. This was the moment. She could let them take him. She could wash her hands of this, protect herself, cut him loose. It would be the smart play. Instead, Vesper Crane stepped forward. She put herself physically between Kalen and the sheriff's horse. "You're not taking him anywhere without a warrant, Dalton. And we both know you don't have one." The sheriff's expression went cold. The folksy mask dropped, revealing the predator underneath. "You're making a mistake, Mrs. Crane. A big one, protecting him. It makes you complicit." "Then I'm complicit," Vesper said, her voice low and dangerous. "Get off my land." For a long, agonizing moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the wind and the jingle of horse tackle. Then Dalton smiled, and it was the most dangerous thing Kalen had ever seen. "Have it your way," he said, his voice soft. He gathered his reins. "But when this all falls apart, and it will, remember I gave you a chance to walk away clean." The 3 riders turned and rode away. But the threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating, long after they'd disappeared over the ridge. Vesper stood perfectly still, her back to him. He could see her hands shaking just slightly. "You shouldn't have done that," Kalen said quietly. "You just painted a target on your own back." "I already had one," she said without turning. Then she looked at him, and something in her expression, something fierce and terrible and alive, made his breath catch. "At least now," she said, "I'm not facing it alone." But as they stood there, the silence of the morning settling back around them, Kalen's eyes drifted to the ground, to the spot where the sheriff's horse had been, to the dust. His blood turned to ice. He grabbed Vesper's arm. "Vesper." "What?" He pointed. There, in the dirt, clear as day, were boot prints. The deputy who had been on the right. The same size, the same worn heel, and the same distinctive drag on the right side. The watcher in the trees was one of Dalton's deputies. The realization hit Kalen like a physical blow. It wasn't just a deputy. It was the deputy, the one who'd been watching them, the one with the limp. The sheriff hadn't just heard a report. He'd sent the watcher. They'd been exposed from the beginning. Every conversation, every plan, every moment they thought they were alone. They weren't. Vesper saw his expression. "What is it?" He just pointed. "The prince. From my house. It's him. One of them." Her face went pale. For a moment, she looked like she might be sick. She stumbled back, her hand going to her mouth. Then, the iron returned. Her spine straightened. Her eyes went from fear to a cold, hard fury. "We have to leave," she said, her voice flat. "Now." "What?" "If they're watching us this closely, they know. They know we found the uniform piece. They know we're onto them." She was already moving toward her horse. "They'll come back. Tonight. Not to talk. Not to threaten." "Come back for what?" She turned to him, her eyes blazing. "To finish what they started with Marcus." She was on her horse in one fluid motion. "Pack what you need. You're staying at the main house from now on. It's safer there." "No," she froze. "What?" "I'm not running," Kalen said, walking toward her. He caught her arm. The contact sent a jolt, an unexpected heat, through both of them. He saw her eyes widen in surprise. He let go, but the connection lingered. "I'm not running to your house like some scared hired hand," he said. "That's exactly what they want. They want us predictable. They want us huddled together, easy to corner." "Then what do you suggest, Ridge?" She shot back, her fear turning to anger. "We just wait here for them to pick us off?" "No," his mind was racing, fitting the pieces together. "We set a trap." "A trap?" "Think about it. The fence they cut, the cattle they're taking. They're not just trying to scare you. They're creating evidence. They're making it look like your operation is failing, like you can't handle it." "So, I'll be forced to sell," she finished, her eyes narrowing. "Cheap." "Exactly. So, tonight, we let them think we're beaten. We let them think we're divided. You go back to the main house. I stay at my place. We make them think you're furious, that I'm scared. We give them exactly what they expect." "And then?" "And then we watch," Kalen said, his voice low. "We see who comes. We see what they do. And we get proof. Real proof. Something even a corrupt sheriff can't ignore. That's dangerous." "Everything about this is dangerous," he said. "At least this way. We control it." She studied him for a long, hard moment. Standing this close, he could see the exhaustion in her face, the faint lines around her eyes from too many sleepless nights. He could smell that scent of sage and leather again, and this time, it was comforting. Something in his chest, a knot of anger he'd been carrying for 3 months, started to unwind. "You know," Vesper said quietly, "when I bought your land, I thought you'd hate me forever." "I did," he admitted, "for about 2 months. And now?" Kalen didn't have an answer that made sense. Or maybe he did, and he just wasn't ready to say it. "Now, I think we're both trapped in the same burning building, Crane. Hating you won't put the fire out." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "That's almost poetic, Ridge. Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation." The moment stretched, charged, and strange. Something was shifting between them, and it was happening too fast for either of them to stop. Then Vesper stepped back, and the distance felt like a loss. "If we're doing this," she said, all business again, "we do it smart. I have a rifle. It belonged to Marcus. It shoots truer than anything I own. You'll need it." "I have my own." "I've seen your gun," she said, with a flash of her old arrogance. "It's older than you are. Be at the main house in an hour. We'll plan this properly." Kalen watched her ride away, his mind churning. An hour ago, she was the enemy who'd taken everything. Now, she was the only person he trusted in a world full of lies. The shift was disorienting, and dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with conspiracies or corrupt lawmen. He went back to his house, his empty, silent house. He started gathering what he'd need for a long night of watching: a blanket, his knife, his father's old spyglass. That's when he noticed it. On his table. The small stack of papers, old bills, receipts. They'd been moved, not much, just slightly out of alignment. Crooked, where he knew he'd left them straight. Someone had been inside, while he was with Vesper. His blood went cold. They'd been in his house, while he was at the north pasture, after they'd carved the message. He checked the room, his heart hammering, looking for what was missing, or what had been left behind. It didn't take long to find it. There, on his bed, where he couldn't possibly miss it. A photograph. Old, faded, the edges curled. It showed a young woman smiling, standing right in front of this very house, her hand on the porch rail. He recognized her instantly. It was his mother. She'd died 20 years ago. His hands shook as he picked it up. Scrawled across the bottom in fresh, dark ink were 5 words that made his stomach turn to water. Your family knew the secret. What secret? What in God's name? His father had been a simple rancher, his mother a school teacher. They'd lived quiet lives, died quiet lives. What could they possibly have known? Unless everything he thought he knew about his family was a lie. He shoved the photograph into his pocket, his mind reeling. He grabbed his saddlebags. He had to get to Vesper. He ran to the stable, his mind a blur. He threw the saddle on his gelding, and as he cinched the strap, he noticed something else. Carved into the saddle leather, where it would press against his leg all day. A single word. Soon. They weren't just watching. They were inside his head. They were inside his home. And they wanted him to know. Whatever was coming, it was going to happen on their timeline. Not his. He rode hard for the main house, the photograph burning like a coal in his pocket. Whatever trap he and Vesper were planning to set, they needed to do it fast, because the real trap was already closing around them, and they were running out of time to escape. When Kalen reached the main house, skidding his horse to a stop in the yard, Vesper was on the porch. Her expression was dark. Utterly, terrifyingly dark. She held up a single piece of paper. "This was nailed to my door," she said, her voice shaking with a rage so cold it burned. 10 minutes ago. Kalen dismounted, his legs unsteady. He took the paper. It was a foreclosure notice, dated for 3 days from now. The bank was calling in all of Vesper's loans, demanding immediate full payment of a sum so large it made Kalen's head spin. A sum no one could raise in 72 hours. And at the bottom, in the same sharp, angry handwriting as the note on the photograph, was a message. Last chance. Sell or lose everything. Vesper paced the length of her porch like a caged lioness. Kalen had never seen her lose composure. Not really, but she was close now. Her hands kept clenching and unclenching at her sides. Her jaw was so tight he could see the muscle working. 3 days, she hissed, her voice a low growl. They gave me 3 days. She stopped, whirling to face him. Her eyes were blazing with fury and something that looked dangerously close to desperation. "The bank manager," she said, "is Nathan Garrett's brother-in-law. I should have seen this coming. I knew it." "Garrett," Kalen said. "The man who threatened your husband." "The same." She slammed her fist against the porch railing, the sound cracking through the air. "I don't have the money, Ridge. Even if I sold every head of cattle, every piece of equipment, I couldn't raise that much in 3 days." She leaned against the railing, her back to him, and for a moment, he thought she might break. They've been planning this for months, maybe years, waiting. Kalen moved closer. He could see her hands were trembling. Without thinking, he covered one of them with his own. The touch froze them both. Her skin was warm, even in the cold afternoon air. He could feel her pulse, racing like a trapped bird. "We fight," he said quietly. Vesper's gaze dropped to their hands, then lifted slowly to his face. Something passed between them, something that had nothing to do with conspiracies or foreclosures, something raw and honest and terrifying. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you helping me? I took everything from you." "Maybe that's exactly why," he said, his voice rough. "I understand what you're going through, what it feels like to have it all just taken." He didn't pull his hand away. He couldn't seem to make himself. "Or maybe," he said, "I'm just tired of running from things that matter." She turned her hand over, her fingers threading through his. It was the most intimate gesture that had ever passed between them, and somehow it felt more dangerous than any of the threats they'd faced. "If we lose," she said, her voice barely audible, "you lose everything all over again." "If we don't fight," he said, holding her gaze, "we've already lost." The moment stretched, both of them knew. They were crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Then Vesper pulled her hand back, and the distance between them suddenly felt like a canyon. "I need to show you something," she said, her voice all business again, but the tremor was still there. "In the house." She led him inside, to a study lined with ledgers and maps. The room smelled of old paper, ink, and her husband's cigar smoke. Vesper went to a locked drawer in the heavy oak desk. She pulled a key from a chain around her neck, unlocked it, and pulled out a thick, leather-bound folder. "Marcus kept records," she said, her voice low. "Everything. Every person who approached him about buying land. Every threat. Every strange thing that happened in the months before he died." She opened the folder, spreading papers across the desk. "He knew he was in danger," she said. He didn't know how deep it went." Kalen studied the documents, notes, affidavits, hand-drawn maps, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The conspiracy wasn't just about Vesper's land, or her ranch. It was about water. According to Marcus's notes, there was a river, an underground river, that ran directly beneath Vesper's property. And someone, likely Garrett, had discovered it was fed by a massive, untouched aquifer. An aquifer that stretched for miles. In a territory where drought could kill a town. In a territory where water was worth more than gold. "Whoever controls that water," Kalen said, his voice a hoarse whisper, "controls everything." "This is what they're after," he said, looking up at her. "Not just your land, the water under it." "I know." Vesper's voice was hollow. "I figured it out 6 months ago, when I finally found his notes." She looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw the crushing weight she'd been carrying, alone. "That's why I can't sell, Ridge. That's why I'll never sell. If Garrett gets this land, he'll control every water source in 3 territories. Towns will have to pay him for the right to drink. Ranchers will go bankrupt. He'll own everything." "Does anyone else know about this?" "Just us," she said, "and whoever killed Marcus." She leaned against the desk. "That's why they're so desperate. That's why the 3-day notice. I'm the only thing standing between them and complete control." Kalen felt the pieces slam into place. The photograph in his pocket suddenly felt like it was on fire. "The photograph," he said. "The one they left me. Of my mother." "What?" He pulled it out, showed her the writing. "Your family knew the secret." Vesper's face went white. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Your father, when he sold me the land. It was for almost nothing. I thought he was just desperate, grieving after your mother died." "But what if he wasn't?" Kalen said, his mind racing. "What if he knew? What if he knew about the water, and he knew Garrett was coming for it?" "What if," Vesper finished, her eyes wide, "he sold it to me? because he knew I'd be the only one who would fight to keep it. The idea settled over them, a revelation so profound it shook them both. Kalen's father hadn't been weak. He hadn't been a failed rancher. He'd been strategic. He'd put the land, the water, in the hands of the one person in the territory stubborn enough and strong enough to hold it against men like Garrett. He protected it, Kalen said quietly, by giving it to you. He must have known, Vesper whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. He must have known what it would cost you, what it would cost all of us. Before Kalen could respond, the sound of breaking glass echoed from the back of the house. They both froze. Then came the smell. Smoke. They ran. They burst into the kitchen to find it filling with black, acrid smoke. Someone had thrown a torch through the back window. The old dry curtains were already engulfed, flames licking up the walls. "Get water!" Vesper yelled, grabbing a heavy rug and beating at the flames. Kalen grabbed a bucket, ran to the pump, but the fire was moving fast. Too fast. The old wood of the house was tinder dry from the drought. Within minutes, half the kitchen was burning. The smoke was so thick he could barely breathe. "We have to get out!" Kalen grabbed Vesper's arm, pulling her toward the door. She resisted, trying to save her home, but the smoke was too much. They stumbled out onto the back porch, coughing, their lungs burning, their eyes streaming. The fire consumed the kitchen in minutes, the flames roaring as they spread toward the main structure. Vesper stood there, her hands clenched, her face illuminated by the orange glow of her burning home. Kalen watched her, his heart breaking for her. He saw every emotion cross her face: rage, grief, exhaustion. And then something changed. Her expression went from devastation to cold, hard calculation. She turned to him, and in her eyes was something that looked almost like relief. "They just made a mistake," she said, her voice a quiet, dangerous hiss. "What?" Kalen was confused. "Vesper, your house." "They're getting desperate," she said, her eyes fixed on the flames. "Sloppy. If they were confident, they'd wait for the foreclosure. They'd let the bank do the dirty work." She looked at him, and a dangerous, wolfish smile touched her lips. "But they're not waiting, which means there's something we have, something in that house, that they need right now." "Something," she said, "that scares them." "The records," Kalen breathed. "Marcus's evidence." "They don't know I have them," she said, "but they suspect, and they're not willing to risk it." She grabbed his hand, her grip like iron, pulling him away from the burning house. "We need to get to town, tonight, before they can stop us." "Town?" Kalen said. "Vesper, the sheriff is in on it. The bank is in on it. The town is their territory." "The sheriff is," she said, pulling him toward the stables. "But the territorial judge isn't." She looked back at him, her face a mask of fierce determination in the firelight. "He arrives tomorrow, on the noon stage. If we can get Marcus's evidence to him, before Garrett even knows what's happening, we can stop the foreclosure, we can stop all of it." It was a desperate plan. It was insane, dangerous. But as Kalen looked at the burning ruins of Vesper's home, at her determined, soot-streaked face, he realized they were out of safe options. It was time to stop defending. It was time to start attacking. "Then let's go," he said. They ran for the stables, but Kalen's instincts were screaming. Something was wrong. The fire. It had been too easy. A distraction. A way to flush them out. And as they rounded the corner of the stable, he understood why. 6 men. Standing in the shadows, rifles pointed right at them. And in the center, stepping out into the firelight, smiling like he'd already won, was a tall man with a scar across his left hand. Nathan Garrett had come to finish what he started. Nathan Garrett looked exactly like Vesper had described him. Tall, lean, and dressed in a suit that cost more than Kalen's entire ranch ever had. He had eyes that didn't just look at you, they calculated. They assessed your value. The scar across his left hand caught the firelight from the burning house, making it look like a fresh, angry wound. "Mrs. Crane," he said. His voice was smooth, educated, the kind of voice that belonged in boardrooms and banks, not in a dark stable yard with 6 gunmen. "I have to say, I'm disappointed. I gave you every opportunity to do this the civilized way. But you insisted on making things difficult." Vesper's hand found Kalen's, squeezed once, hard, a warning or reassurance, he couldn't tell. "The civilized way." Vesper's voice was pure ice, "like the way you gave my husband." Garrett's smile didn't falter. Marcus was stubborn. He made choices that had consequences. "I'm hoping you're smarter than he was. Smart enough to know you'll kill us whether we cooperate or not." "Kill you?" Garrett laughed, a soft, genuinely amused sound that made Kalen's skin crawl. "Mrs. Crane. Vesper. I'm a businessman, not a murderer. I simply want," he said, "what's mine. The land, the water rights." He took a step closer. "And those documents, the ones your late husband so inconveniently compiled." Kalen felt Vesper tense beside him. The documents, the ledgers, Marcus's evidence, they were still in the house, in the study, in the burning house. If Garrett got them, all proof was gone, forever. The documents burned. Vesper's voice was flat, devoid of all emotion. "They were in the study," she said. "We were just looking at them, when your men set the fire." Garrett's expression finally shifted, a flicker of uncertainty, of rage. "You're lying." "Am I?" Vesper said. "Check the ruins yourself. Everything in that house is ash now, including your evidence." For a long moment, nobody moved. Kalen could see Garrett calculating, trying to read her. Was she bluffing? The 6 gunmen looked nervous, their eyes darting between Garrett, Vesper, and the roaring fire. One of them, Kalen noticed with a jolt, was wearing a deputy's badge. "Even if that's true," Garrett said slowly, his confidence returning, "it doesn't change your situation. You still owe the bank money you don't have. In 3 days. This land becomes mine anyway." He smiled. "All you've done is make yourself homeless in the process." 3 days is a long time, Mr. Garrett." Vesper took a step forward. Kalen's heart stopped. She was walking toward armed men, like she had nothing left to lose. "A lot can happen in 3 days," she said, her voice clear and strong. "A territorial judge can arrive. Evidence can be presented. Conspiracies can be exposed." Garrett's hand moved, resting on the holster at his hip. "Or accidents can happen." His eyes flicked to the fire. "Terrible accidents. 2 people. Caught in a house fire. Trying to save what they could. Tragic, really. But these things happen in a drought. The wood gets so dry." The threat was clear. Naked. They'd never make it to town. They'd never reach the judge. Garrett would kill them tonight, right here, and blame it on the fire. But then... Vesper smiled. It was the coldest, sharpest, most dangerous thing Kalen had ever seen. "The thing about Marcus's documents, Garrett," she said, her voice almost conversational. "He was always so careful, meticulous." She gestured to the burning house. "That wasn't the only set." Garrett's face went white. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Vesper said. "Maybe. Or maybe. While you've been watching me, I've been 2 steps ahead of you." She moved closer still, fearless. "Kill us. Go ahead. But those documents, the copies, they go straight to the federal marshal in the Capitol. By telegraph. Tonight." "I have people," she said, "waiting for my signal. If I don't send word that I'm alive by midnight. They send everything. Kalen held his breath. He didn't know. He had no idea if she was telling the truth, or if she was gambling both their lives on the greatest bluff he'd ever seen. From the look on Garrett's face, he wasn't sure either. "You're smart," Garrett said finally, his voice a low growl. "Smarter than your husband. I'll give you that. But you're also trapped," he shot back. "You can't stay on this land. You can't pay your debts. So what's your play here, Mrs. Crane? Because from where I stand, you've got nothing." "I've got time," Vesper said. 3 days of it, and I've got something you need more than I need your money." She crossed her arms. "I've got the water rights." Garrett's head snapped up. "That's right," Vesper said, pressing her advantage. "You can foreclose on the land. But the water rights, Marcus filed them separately, with the territory. They can't be seized by a local bank. They're in a trust. And without my signature," she said, her voice dropping, "that aquifer stays locked, and I will never consent." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the fire seemed to quiet. Garrett's expression shifted, from fury to calculation to something that looked almost like respect. "A stalemate," he said. "For now." "For now," Vesper agreed. Garrett studied them both for a long, hard moment. Kalen kept his face blank, his hand near the hilt of his knife. Then Garrett gestured to his men. "Lower your weapons." "Sir?" the deputy asked, confused. "But I said, lower your weapons." Garrett's voice was steel. "Mrs. Crane and we're going to resolve this, like civilized people." He smiled at Vesper. "Aren't we, Mrs. Crane?" "Civilized," Vesper said, "like you resolved things with Marcus?" Something dark and violent flashed in Garrett's eyes. "Your husband died because he was careless, arrogant. I'd hate for history to repeat itself." "Accidents happen so easily out here," he said, his gaze shifting. To Kalen. "Especially to people who don't have anyone watching their backs." The threat was clear. They might have a stalemate, but Kalen was not part of that equation. They could kill him, and Vesper's bluff wouldn't mean a thing. One fewer person protecting her. One step closer to breaking her. "Come near him," Vesper said, her voice low and deadly. Garrett paused. "You come near him," Vesper said, "and I'll make sure every newspaper from here to Washington knows exactly what you are. I'll destroy you so thoroughly you won't be able to buy a glass of water in a saloon." "I will burn you," she whispered. Garrett just smiled. "Protective. How touching. I look forward to seeing which one of you breaks first." He mounted his horse, his men following suit. But before he rode away, he looked back, his face a mask of cold hatred in the firelight. 3 days, Mrs. Crane. After that, water rights won't matter. You'll have nothing left to protect." He looked at Kalen. "And your friend. He'll learn what happens to people who stand between me and what's mine." They disappeared into the darkness, leaving Kalen and Vesper standing alone in the suffocating glow of the dying fire. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Vesper's legs gave out. Kalen caught her before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping around her. She was shaking. Not from cold, not from fear, from pure, unadulterated rage and exhaustion. "I've got you," he said quietly. She looked up at him, her face streaked with soot and tears she'd been holding back. "The documents," she whispered, her voice breaking. They really did burn, Kalen. I don't have copies. I don't have anything. I was lying." "You have me," he said. That might not be enough," she cried. Kalen helped her stand, but he didn't let go. "Then we make it enough. We have 3 days. That's 3 days more than Garrett thinks we can survive." Vesper nodded, wiping her face, but he could see the terror in her eyes. The bluff had worked. But barely. And when Garrett discovered she had nothing, when she didn't send her signal by midnight, he'd come back. And next time, he wouldn't talk first. "We need to get to town," Vesper said, pulling herself together. "Tonight. Now, before he realizes I was lying, before he cuts the telegraph lines." They turned toward the remaining horses, toward the stable, and that's when Kalen saw it. The stable doors were open. The horses were gone. Garrett's men hadn't just stood there. They'd cut them loose. They were stranded, alone, miles from town, with no evidence, no home, and no way to reach the judge. And Garrett knew it. They walked. There was nothing else to do. 15 miles to town, maybe more, through the dark. The moon was a sliver, giving just enough light to see the ruts in the road. Vesper's expensive, custom-made riding boots weren't made for this. Kalen could see her struggling, but she didn't complain. She just kept walking, her jaw set in that stubborn line he was beginning to recognize. By midnight, he could see she was limping. Badly. "We need to rest." "We don't have time," she said, her voice strained. "We don't have a choice." He grabbed her arm, gently pulling her off the road. "You're bleeding through your boot." He pointed to the dark stain spreading across the leather. 5 minutes, that's all." She finally nodded, her pride giving way to exhaustion. They moved to a cluster of rocks that offered some shelter from the wind. Vesper sat heavily, pulling off her boot with a sharp, hissing intake of breath. The back of her heel was raw, bleeding freely. She'd walked miles on an open wound and hadn't said a single word. Before she could protest, Kalen pulled off his own shirt, wincing at the cold night air. He tore a long strip from the bottom. "This is going to hurt," he said. "Everything hurts," she whispered. She let him wrap her foot. His hands, calloused and rough from years of work, were surprisingly gentle. The intimacy of the moment wasn't lost on either of them. His fingers against her skin, her eyes watching his face in the dim moonlight. Something passed between them that had nothing to do with survival. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly, tying off the makeshift bandage. "Because stopping wouldn't change anything," she said. "We still need to get to town." She looked at him, and in the moonlight, he could see every line of exhaustion on her face. "I'm sorry I got you into this, Kalen. You could have walked away. You should have." "I made my choice," he said. "A choice that might get you killed." Kalen finished wrapping her foot, but he didn't move away. He was still kneeling in front of her. "My father, he once told me, the measure of a person isn't what they do when things are easy. It's what they do when everything is falling apart." He met her eyes. "It's what they do when they have to choose between what's right and what's safe." "You chose right," he said. "So did I." Vesper's hand, hesitant, came up, touched his face. Just a brush of her fingers against his jaw, but it sent a jolt of electricity through him. "I was wrong about you, Ridge," she whispered. When I bought your land, I thought you were just weak, another failed rancher." Her thumb traced his cheekbone. "And now?" "Now," she said, her voice thick, "I think you might be the strongest man I've ever met." "And the most foolish," he said, a small smile touching his lips. "Anyone with sense would have run by now. Maybe I don't have sense." His hand covered hers, pressing it against his face. "Or maybe I just finally found something worth fighting for." The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken words, with possibility. Kalen could see her pulse beating in her throat. He could feel the slight tremor in her hand. They'd crossed from allies to something else, something that made his chest ache and his breath come fast. He wanted to close the distance. He wanted to kiss her until neither of them could remember why they were fighting or what they were running from. He leaned in. Hoofbeats. They both froze. On the road, coming fast. They pressed back against the rocks, holding their breath, hidden by the deep shadows. 2 riders. They passed in a cloud of dust, moving fast toward town. In the moonlight, Kalen saw the glint of metal, badges, sheriff's men. They're heading to town, Vesper breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. To Garrett. They'll tell him we're not dead, that we're on foot. The net wasn't just closing, it was tightening. Vesper stood, testing her wrapped foot. We have to move faster. No, Kalen said, his mind racing. We don't go to town. She looked at him, confused. But the judge, he arrives in town at noon. How else do we reach him? The stage road, Kalen said, pulling her up. It runs through Carson Ridge before it hits town. There's a way station there, 8 miles north of here, for the horses. If we cut across country, he said, pointing into the darkness, we can intercept the stage before it reaches town, before it reaches Garrett's people. That's rough country, she said, peering into the blackness. It'll take us the rest of the night, he said, but we'll get there first. He offered her his hand. Can you make it? Vesper looked at his outstretched hand, then up at his face. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. I walked 15 miles on a bleeding foot, Ridge, she said, a small, fierce smile on her face. I can make 8 more. They moved through the darkness, leaving the road and their old lives behind. The land was broken, full of ravines and scrub oak that caught at their clothes. More than once, Kalen had to half-carry Vesper across a gully or up a steep, rocky slope. Each time the contact felt like fire and ice. Necessary. Dangerous. Inevitable. Dawn found them on a ridge overlooking the way station. It was a small, lonely building, a squat stone house, a corral, and a water pump. It was built to service the stage, a brief stop on its long journey between territories. Smoke rose from the chimney. Someone was there. If we go down there, Vesper said quietly, her voice hoarse, we're trusting whoever is inside. We have no weapons, no leverage, nothing but our word against Garrett's. Kalen looked at her. Her face was streaked with soot and dirt. Her hair was a wild mess. She looked beautiful. Your word is enough, he said. She looked at him, and something in her expression softened. You have more faith in me than I deserve. Or exactly as much as you've earned, he said. He started down the slope. Come on. The stage will be here in a few hours. We need to be ready. But as they approached the way station, the door opened. A woman stepped out. She was older, maybe 60, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that looked like they'd seen everything and missed nothing. She had a rifle in her hands, and it was pointed right at them. She looked at Vesper. She looked at Kalen. Then, slowly, she lowered the rifle. Vesper Crane, the woman said, her voice like gravel. I wondered when you'd finally show up. Vesper stopped, her hand flying to Kalen's arm. Do I know you? You don't, the woman said, but I knew your husband. She gestured them inside with the rifle. Name's Ruth Mallory, Marcus. He sent me copies of his documents, 2 years ago. Kalen and Vesper froze. He said, Ruth continued, if anything happened to him, I should hold them until you needed them. She looked them up and down. Looks like that time has come. Kalen felt a surge of hope so powerful it almost knocked him off his feet. The documents. They existed. Marcus had made copies, but Ruth wasn't finished. There's something else you need to know, she said, her expression grim. Something Marcus didn't even know. About the water. About Garrett. She looked at Kalen. And about why your father really gave up his land without a fight. She pulled out a different folder, one of her own, and spread the papers across her table. What they saw made both of them go cold. The conspiracy wasn't just about water rights. It was bigger, darker, and it went all the way to the territorial capital. Marcus didn't just discover an aquifer, Ruth said quietly, her finger tracing a map. He discovered that Garrett and his partners, they've been buying up every water source in the territory for the past 5 years, systematically. They're planning, she said, to hold entire towns hostage. Your land, Vesper. It's just the last piece, the keystone. And they will burn this entire territory to the ground to get it. Kalen looked at the documents. His father's name, his father's signature, on a testimony, a warning, written the week before he'd sold the land. My father. He knew, Kalen breathed. He knew everything. He did, Ruth said, her eyes full of a deep, old sadness. And it killed him. She met Kalen's eyes. Just like it killed Marcus, and just like it'll kill you both, if you go through with this. In the distance, a stage horn sounded. The judge was coming. They had minutes to decide, fight, or run, risk everything, or save themselves. Vesper looked at Kalen. In her eyes, he didn't see fear. He saw the same steel, the same stubborn determination he felt in his own chest. They'd come too far. They'd lost too much. We're going through with it, Vesper said, whatever it costs. Ruth nodded slowly. Then I hope you're ready, because when Garrett finds out you have these documents, he won't just try to kill you. He'll try to destroy everything you love, everyone you've ever cared about. He'll make you wish you'd died in that fire with your husband. The stage was pulling up outside. The judge was here, and so was their last chance. But as Kalen moved toward the door, Ruth grabbed his arm. Her grip was like a man-trap. One more thing, she said, her voice a low whisper. The sheriff, Dalton, he's not Garrett's biggest ally in this. What? Vesper demanded. There's someone else, Ruth said, her eyes dark. Someone closer to you both than you think. Someone who's been feeding Garrett information. From the very beginning. Who? Vesper whispered. Ruth's expression was grim. That's what you need to figure out. Before they figure out you're still alive. The territorial judge was a weathered man named Harrison Wells. He had eyes that had seen every kind of lie the frontier could produce. He stepped off the stage, brushed dust from his coat, and looked at Vesper and Kalen, covered in soot, dirt, and blood, with the tired patience of someone who'd heard 1,000 desperate stories. Mrs. Crane, he said, his voice flat, I heard about the foreclosure. I'm sorry, but bank matters. They're not in my jurisdiction. This isn't about the bank, Vesper said, her voice clear and strong. She held up the folder Ruth had given them. This, she said, is about conspiracy, murder, and an attempt to control every water source in 3 territories. Wells's expression shifted. Those are serious accusations. I have serious evidence. She opened the folder, spreading the documents across the way station table. My husband documented everything before he died. Names, dates, land purchases, water rights transfers. Nathan Garrett and his partners, she said, have been systematically buying up water sources and bankrupting anyone who won't sell. They murdered my husband when he refused. They burned my house down last night. And they will destroy this entire territory if someone doesn't stop them. The judge studied the documents, his face growing darker with each page. This is detailed, he said. Very detailed. But Mrs. Crane, do you understand what you're alleging? Garrett has connections, all the way to the Capitol, accusing him of this. It could destroy you. I have absolute proof, Vesper said. My husband's testimony, witness accounts, and... She pointed to a specific page. And this, a confession, written by my ranch foreman 3 days before he disappeared. He was working for Garrett, feeding him information, sabotaging my fences, scaring off my workers. Kalen felt his stomach drop. The foreman, the man who'd worked for Vesper for 2 years, the traitor. "Where is this foreman now?" Wells asked. "Gone," Vesper said. "But his testimony, it's sworn and notarized. It's legal evidence." The sound of hoofbeats interrupted them. Through the window, Kalen saw them. Riders, approaching fast, 6 of them, led by Sheriff Dalton, and right behind them, Nathan Garrett. "They followed the stage," Kalen said, his hand grabbing for a weapon that wasn't there. "They know we're here." Ruth moved to the door, her rifle in hand. "Judge Wells came here under territorial protection. They can't touch him, but they can sure as hell touch you." The riders pulled up outside. Garrett dismounted slowly, his expression calm, but his eyes were full of murder. "Judge Wells," Garrett said, his voice smooth as silk. "What a pleasant surprise. I didn't expect to see you at this humble way station." "Mr. Garrett," Wells said, his voice neutral, "Mrs. Crane was just presenting some interesting documents." "Was she?" Garrett's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I imagine she's making all sorts of wild accusations. The woman's been unstable since her husband's death. Quite tragic." He looked at Kalen. "Now she's dragging this poor man into her delusions." "These aren't delusions," Vesper said. She stepped forward, right out the door, and Kalen saw a new kind of steel in her spine. This wasn't the woman who had collapsed in his arms. This was the woman who had survived. The woman who had refused to break. "These are facts," she said, "documented facts. And you, Mr. Garrett, are going to answer for every single one of them." Garrett's mask finally cracked. "You have nothing," he snarled. "Your house burned. Your evidence burned with it. Whatever papers you're showing the judge are forgeries. Desperate lies from a desperate woman." "Then why are you here?" Kalen spoke for the first time. All 6 rifles swung toward him. He didn't flinch. "If she has nothing," Kalen said, "why bring armed men to a way station? Why threaten a territorial judge?" "Seems to me," Kalen said, "you're the desperate one, Garrett." The silence was absolute. Judge Wells looked at Garrett. He looked at Vesper. He looked at Kalen. His expression was thoughtful. Then he turned to the sheriff. "Dalton," he said, his voice iron, "I am placing Mr. Nathan Garrett under territorial investigation. You will escort him to the Capitol, where he will answer questions about these allegations." Dalton's face went white. "Sir, I don't think that's—" "Are you refusing a direct order from a territorial judge, Sheriff?" Wells's voice was quiet. "Dangerous. Because that would make you complicit in whatever crimes Mr. Garrett may have committed." Dalton looked at Garrett. He looked at the judge. He looked at his deputies. He was calculating his options. Finally, he nodded. "No, sir, I'm not refusing." Garrett's expression was murderous. "This isn't over, Vesper, even if I'm delayed. The foreclosure stands. You still can't pay your debts. In 2 days, your land becomes bank property, and the bank answers to my partners." "About that," Ruth Mallory said, stepping forward. She was holding a different folder. "Marcus wasn't just documenting your crimes, Garrett," she said. "He was planning ahead. 2 years ago," she said, "he transferred the water rights to a trust that can't be foreclosed on, can't be sold, and can't be transferred. Without unanimous approval from the 3 trustees." She smiled. "Those trustees," she said, "are Vesper Crane, myself, and Judge Wells here, who Marcus appointed specifically, because he knew the judge couldn't be bought." Garrett's face went from red to white. That's impossible. I checked the records." "You checked the property records," Ruth said, her smile sharp as a knife. "Marcus filed the water trust with the territorial government, separate jurisdiction." "Even if you foreclose on the land," she said, "you will never control the water. And without the water, That land is worthless. You lose, Garrett, Ruth said. You just don't know it yet. The judge nodded slowly. Clever man. Your husband. Very clever. He looked at Garrett. Sheriff Dalton. Take Mr. Garrett into custody. He'll remain under territorial guard until his hearing. Kalen watched as Garrett was led away, his face a mask of controlled, silent fury. But before he mounted his horse, Garrett looked back at Vesper. One last time. I had them burn his favorite horse, too, he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear. The black mare. Just so you know, I wanted him to suffer. Before the end. Vesper's face went pale, but her voice was steady. And I want you to know, Garrett, that every single day you spend answering for what you did to Marcus will be worth every sleepless night I've had since he died. I hope, she whispered, the weight of it crushes you. They watched the riders disappear toward town, only when they were gone. Only when the dust had settled did Vesper's legs finally give out. Kalen caught her. He held her upright. It's over, he said quietly. You won. Did I? She looked up at him. He could see the exhaustion, the grief, the relief, all warring in her expression. I lost my home. I still owe money I don't have. And even with the water rights protected, I can't run this operation alone. You're not alone, he said. She searched his face. What are you saying? I'm saying, he said, that I've been fighting the wrong battle. I thought losing my land meant losing everything. But maybe it just meant finding something better. He tucked a strand of hair, caked with soot, behind her ear. His touch was gentle. You asked me once why I was helping you, he said. The truth is, somewhere between hating you and fighting beside you, I stopped seeing you as the woman who took my land. I started seeing you, he said, as the woman I'd follow anywhere. Vesper's eyes shimmered. Ridge, Kalen, I don't need a hired hand. I don't need someone following me. Good, he said, because I'm not offering to follow. He smiled. It was the first real smile he'd felt in months. I'm offering to stand beside you, as a partner, equal stake, equal say, equal risk. You need someone who knows this land, he said. I need someone who has the strength to hold it, together. We might actually make this work. And the rent, Vesper said, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. You still owe me 3 months. So you say, he said, I can't pay my rent. He pulled her closer, and the space between them felt charged, electric. What are you going to do about it, Crane? Throw me out? I should, she whispered. You're trouble. So are you, he whispered back. His forehead touched hers. But maybe. That's exactly what we both need. She kissed him then. It wasn't soft. It wasn't tentative. It was fierce and certain, like she was claiming something she'd been afraid to want for 2 long years. Like he was the answer. Kalen kissed her back with everything he had, tasting smoke and ash and stubborn determination, and the promise of something worth fighting for. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Vesper was smiling, really, truly smiling. Equal partners, she said, equal partners. Then I suppose, she said, I can forgive the rent, this time. They stood together, watching the sun rise over land that belonged to both of them now. Land they'd fought for, land they'd almost died for, and land that, together, they'd make sure stayed free. Behind them, Ruth cleared her throat. I hate to interrupt, but you two should probably head back, before everyone thinks you both died in that fire. And Vesper, you'll want to rebuild. I know a good carpenter. Vesper laughed. The sound was lighter than Kalen had ever heard it. She looked at him, her eyes shining. "I know one too," she said. "One who's about to be very, very busy." If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We've got another tale from the Forgotten West coming your way next week, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Thanks for stopping by.